Hi, welcome to this special extended edition of TOEFL Masters TOEFL Minute. Now, we're here because there are lots of problems that students have with the TOEFL, but today we want to tackle one specific issue, and that's with the listening section. A lot of our students at our academy have talked about two main problems they have with the listening section, taking notes. The first is they say people speak too fast. Right? They can't hear the conversations and understand or the lectures because the speakers are just moving too quickly. The second thing people say, the students talk about, is they can't write enough notes. Right? They just can't get everything down on their piece of paper that they have to then prepare them to use for answering the questions when they come up. Mm-hmm. So we want to bring in TOEFL Master William and help us out with that. I mean, how can students overcome speakers who speak too fast and not being able to take enough notes fast enough?
Okay, it's two questions, so I'll have to answer it one section at a time. Mm-hmm. The first question is that how do we understand what people are saying when they're speaking too fast?
Right.
That question is a little difficult because the reason they seem to be speaking fast is that we're translating from our native language to English. Mm-hmm. I've made these TOEFL tests and I've had to learn to speak more slowly. So I know that they're not speaking fast. Right. They're actually having to speak more slowly. So if it seems like they're going too fast, it's because we're trying to translate.
People are processing what they hear in English and trying to figure out what that is in their own language and then take that as...
That's correct. The way to correct this is to listen more. The big problem is that most of our students, the only English they get is during their TOEFL classes.
Sure.
Or the professional students are working and the only English that they get is maybe 2, 3, or 4 hours a week in their classes.
So
the only way that they can listen, the only way they can learn English better is to spend more time with it. Mm-hmm. Many of my students don't have the time. If they're in school, they have all their other studies to do.
Sure.
So how do I deal with that with my own students? I've learned that our brains actually learn while we're sleeping. Scientifically, it's proven that we learn a language better while we're sleeping than while we're awake. So what I've done is I've made copies of the Princeton Review CD that has the listening part.
Yeah.
And I give that to my students. They take it home and they listen to it while they're sleeping. Invariably, they improve. They nearly double their scores within a week by listening to that while they're sleeping. So that's the first thing they can do.
Why is that? Why would they increase so well with listening to that CD?
Because your brain has to learn the patterns. Mm-hmm. The TOEFL test is a standardized test. They say they say different things in the same way over and over again.
Sure. Introduction,
in other words,
body, reasons, details.
That's correct. Right? They have different subjects, mm-hmm. but it's the same pattern. Right? They introduce the subject, they give you reasons, examples, and details, or theories, examples, and details, right? Or cause and effect, examples, and details. It's always the same pattern. So once you learn these patterns, your brain can anticipate the information coming. Mm-hmm. And then it's easier. And of course you have to learn vocabulary. And you learn that through listening to English.
Repetition.
Repetition.
Right.
So that's a more difficult way to deal with it. Doing it in your sleep gives you no excuse for not having time to do it. Okay? It sounds crazy, but I can guarantee you it works.
Right. Science is behind this.
That's works. Right. Real science, you can Google it if you want to. It works. If you really want to see if it works, do it. And practice it. It really works. It'll work for you. The other thing is that students feel that they don't have enough time to write all the notes.
Right.
If you feel that you don't have enough time to write all the notes, it's because you're writing too much. The passages are short. Conversations are 2.5 to 3.5 minutes. Lectures are short. They're 5 to 6 minutes. And they're not going to test you on everything. Conversations have 5 questions. Lectures have 6. Mm-hmm. They're only testing you on the main points. There are different types of conversations. There's problem solution and service encounters.
Okay.
The problem solutions, the only thing you have to listen for is the problem, the possible solutions, and the outcome. So you're going to have 2 students who introduce each other. Hi Bob, hi Mary. How are you today? Oh, I have a problem.
That's your key to stop and say, what's the problem?
Write down the problem. Don't write out a full sentence, just write down the key word. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm having difficulty with my homework assignment for science class. Don't make this long note, I'm having difficulty with it. Write down problem with the homework, right? Homework problem. So abbreviate your notes. Keep it simple. Don't worry about spelling. Many people lose time trying to figure out how to spell a word while the conversation
Doesn't
is
matter,
continuing.
notes aren't graded.
No one's going to look at your notes. As long as you understand your notes, it works. I have a student at one time would draw pictures instead of words. I had no idea what the pictures meant, but he did.
Worked for him.
So listen for key information. For the problem solution, you're going to write that problem. The first question is going to be what was the student's problem? You have the first note is the student's problem.
Sure.
And then the other notes are about the solutions. So you write down the two possible solutions and the details that go with them. And then the last question will be, what was the students, what were they going to do about it? What was the outcome? So you just write down what the outcome is and abbreviate. Another question type for conversations will be service encounter.
And that means if a student walks into the library or needs to go to the registrar's office.
That's exactly right. What if a student has to sign up for classes? The student will have a purpose for going to see the professional.
Okay.
The professional will have certain requirements that the student must do in order to fulfill their purpose. So when the student comes in, there'll be a greeting, right? Hello, hi, and what can I do for you? The professional will say, what can I do for you? How can I help you? What can I do for you today? Something like that. The student is going to respond with the purpose for being there. Write down why they're there. At that time, the professional will give certain requirements that the student must do. Write down the requirements. All of the questions are going to ask you, why was the student there? What were the requirements? And what are the details that deal with the purpose and the requirements? So if you have just those things and abbreviated details, you'll be able to answer the questions that come with that passage.
The notes, you reference the notes when you answer your questions. You see the question, you use your notes to eliminate the wrong choices.
The only reason you're taking notes is to use your process of elimination to eliminate anything that doesn't match your notes. Also, when you're taking notes, point by point. Don't make circles and arrows and confuse your notes.
It's a logical order.
The information comes in the same order, the questions come in the same order the information came in the passage. So if you have 6 questions, right, the last question will be the last thing that was mentioned in the passage. But if you have a circle and arrows pointing to things, you're confused. You don't know where in the passage it came. And so you're lost in your notes. So take it point by point by point. And when the first question comes, go to the top of your notes. At the last question, go to the bottom of your notes.
So you told us about conversations. Now what about the lectures? Lectures are several question sets on lectures. What do students do for that?
There are different types of lectures, but I really lump them all in the same. There are different books that teach it all. There are several different types, but they all have the same types of patterns. The professor is going to introduce the main topic. What we're going to talk about today is, one thing I'd like to talk about today is, tonight we're going to talk about, the topic for today is, whatever they say next, write it down. And don't write down the topic of the lecture is volcanic eruptions, just put down Volk erupt. Write down just the key words.
And that being the top of your page, you know it's the main topic.
The first question will be, what was the lecture mainly about? What was the professor's main topic?
Right.
And you'll have the note for it right there at the top. Then the professor is going to go into giving more information, detailed information about the lecture. When the professor asks a question to a specific student, write down the question and write down the answer. That will be the answer to one of your questions. When a student asks the professor a question, write down the question and the answer. That will be the answer to one of your questions. When the professor says, now look at the drawing or now look at the diagram, when they show a picture or a drawing or a diagram, look at it, listen to what the professor is saying, and write down the description, the details that they give of the drawing.
That'll be a multi-point question.
Those will be the answers to multiple points. They're all multiple choice, but there will be multiple points for these questions. You really want to look at the picture because sometimes you don't get to write all the notes, but your mind will remember what the picture looks like. Your brain will remember the picture. So you'll be able to answer those questions based on your notes and your memory of what the picture looked like. Furthermore, when the professor says something like, for example, write down the example and the detail. When he says there are several theories, write down the theory and the detail. If you miss something, this is very important, if you miss something, leave a space and then continue. Don't think in your mind, watch yourself talk. If you say, oh my God, I forgot this, I'm going to miss this, I'm going to fail my test because I missed something. While you're talking to yourself, you're missing everything else that's being said. Better to miss one thing, and possibly, because it may not even be something that you're going to be tested on. So don't worry about it if you miss it. So if you miss something, make a little space to show that you missed it, and then continue taking notes from wherever you are then.
Perhaps you can use your notes and the question the answer choices to fill in the blanks and still eliminate wrong choices and still do well.
And besides that, they often repeat parts of the passage.
Right.
There are 3 question types where they actually repeat part of the passage.
Mhm.
That is the rhetorical purpose, the inference, and the tone questions.
Mhm.
Rhetorical purpose questions ask, why is the professor talking about this main point? And the inference questions ask, what does the professor mean by this? Tone questions ask about the tone. Is the person sad, happy, confused?
Sure.
These questions are easy to answer because they give you the information.
They play it back.
They say, now listen again to part of the passage, and they play that part back. Don't confuse these questions. Don't look for reasoning. Only thing you have to do is use your notes and eliminate anything that's not true according to what they just said.
Mhm.
Keep it simple, right? It's either true according to the passage or not true. Use your process of elimination to eliminate things that are not what is in your notes. For example, if it's contrary, if it's the opposite, it's wrong. If it's adding different information, right? If it's adding information, if it's not mentioned in the passage, it's wrong. If it's altered in some way, if it changed the meaning, it's wrong. So use your process of elimination and your notes to eliminate wrong choices. Remember, there's never right answers on this test. There's only the best answer. The best answer is what's left after you've eliminated using your process of elimination and your notes to show what isn't there.
In lectures too, is it also good to keep in mind when the professor says what's going to happen next class? Isn't that also a question?
Yes, good point. I forgot to mention that. Anytime the professor says what they're going to do next, that will be the last question. What will the class do next? And so you'll answer that question based on your notes. Again, don't write down everything they say. Listen for these specific points, right? The main topic is what it's about. Any questions that the professor asks specifically to a student, any questions that the students ask specifically, when they're showing a picture or a drawing or a diagram, look at the drawing, diagram, or picture, write down the details for that. Anytime they say what's going to happen next, write that down. That'll get most of your questions right there. That's the answer to most of your questions.
And that's great advice. We hope you found that helpful, and for any more advice, tips, tricks, and more great information, please go to TOEFLmaster.com.